Gotcha! I didn't do a poll this time. I did what I wanted to. What do you gotta say about that? Yeah, you have no idea what kind of dark hole you have uncovered with your betrayal of our trust. You can't hate me if I don't do what you tell me to do. Actually, wait, no, you can't do that. Look. RE8's coming out. So I wanted to kind of talk more about Resident Evil before that happens. So we're going to do that today, right now. Resident Evil 5 and 6. Oh yeah, doubling down. And no one here is going to interrupt me this time. Nobody out.
Oh, can I help?
No!
It makes me question why!
So starting off with RE5, it's the sequel to RE4. Okay, good talk. Okay, alright, or we'll actually talk about it. So RE5 was a hugely hyped up game. Like, I remember everyone talking about it when it was first announced, seeing the trailers. I was excited too. It looked really cool, and it was basically expanding on the core concepts established in 4 and carrying the series forward, but also bringing us back to the core plot line from the original games. And this was big for me because one of my issues with 4 is that effectively it had very little, if nothing, to do with the overall narrative of the story of Resident Evil at that time. There were a lot of things that were left up to the imagination, like we just didn't know what was going on with it. 4 just seemed like filler from a narrative perspective. But 5 was bringing us back home and was going to put a cap on the original story, started out with the original Resident Evil. So from that perspective, this was a hugely popular and exciting idea that everyone was down for. Although it wasn't a stranger to controversy, and I guess I kind of have to talk about this, as I'm sure I'll be asked about it if I don't. But back when 5 was first announced, people were accusing it of being, what's the word I'm looking for? Racist. Yeah, okay, let's talk about that. The issue was the game stars Chris Redfield this time. He's one of the original characters from the first game, and he is a white dude. And since the game is set in Africa, you may notice that he is currently shooting a lot of black dudes in the face. Now, on one hand, these are all infected people, and it is Africa. So from that perspective, you could say, yeah, but he's not doing it because they're black, he's doing it because they're infected with Las Plagas. Yes, but in the surface, yeah, it looked kind of bad. And believe me when I say that this controversy was not small. Many major news outlets at the time were talking about it, like this was a big deal. And this was before social justice warrior was even a thing, like that term didn't exist back then. So this was happening before everybody was trying to get offended about everything. Now looking at 5 through my eyes, again, white dude, I don't think it's intentionally meant to be offensive to anybody. The setting is Africa. There's gonna be a predominantly black population in Africa. And the game just happens to star Chris, but he's one of the original characters. Of course it stars Chris, he just happens to be white. What are they gonna do, change into a black guy and make it not racist anymore magically? The narrative really isn't supposed to have anything to do with race. And the killing and violence, again, has nothing to do with anything racially charged. There were some remedies in place to help with this. Since 5 is a co-op game, more on that later, Chris's teammate this time around is Sheva, who is African herself. So that helps alleviate some concerns. In addition, I want to point out that the narrative of 5 actually has a lot to do with the oppressive nature of the pharmaceutical corporations in their treatment of Africans. There are multiple times where it's referred to the notion that these people were used as test subjects under the nose of the rest of the world. Nobody cared because, what? It's just Africa. Umbrella, as well as other pharmaceutical corporations, used Africa as a test bed for many of their biological weapons. So it establishes these people as being treated as subhuman to line some American CEOs' pockets, or if you're Umbrella, trying to, liberate the world through the use of eugenics. The point is that the narrative takes into account the notion that these people were being treated like less than human because they were considered inferior. You, as the hero, are trying to put a stop to this. So it's not like the game isn't aware of the implications of what's happening here. And it takes that into account in the plot, in a message that basically says, oh my god, these are people too. What are you doing, you monsters? The only reason you have to fight them is because they're infected. There's no cure for this, so it's not like you have any other real option. 5 handles its characters a lot better than 4 does when it comes to treating the fact that you're killing people in a much more sensitive way. Chris and Sheva don't want to be doing what they're doing, they have to, because there's no other option. They have no other real choice. Sheva, multiple times, laments the fact that it's her people who are suffering, and if there were any other way, that's what they'd be doing. Chris has his own personal stake in the game, but he is too really disturbed by what they're looking at. If anything, 5 handles this whole situation a lot better than 4 does, because 4 had a smaller controversy with how it treated Spaniards. And to be honest, looking at 4, I actually think it handles it a lot worse. Not only does Leon never really acknowledge the fact that he's killing people that used to be good people that were turned into evil cult members through, a malicious parasite, but Leon doesn't really seem to ever get disturbed by what he's seeing. Chris and Sheva are much more down to earth and much more human about the situation. So overall, not only is the plot exceptional in terms of that delivery, but I think that hammers home the fact that there's no intentional racism going on here. Capcom did take the controversy to heart though and added some other enemies that weren't black. So now there's like random white zombies just hanging around. And to be fair, the entire population of Africa isn't all black, so it kind of still makes sense. I mean, I guess it's kind of like in the old games, all the zombies were white, which is of course ridiculous. You were in America. I assure you there's more than just white people here. That being said, the game isn't completely innocent of at least something offensive, and that's... Look, Tribal Sheva, why would you... Okay, to be fair, this is a bonus costume mostly used for the mercenary mode multiplayer, but... Yo, okay, alright. The issue here, by the way, is not the fan service. Putting a sexy outfit on a female character in a video game, especially back then, is totally normal. That happened all the time. But could you have gone with anything else? Like, you couldn't do something similar to Jill's Zero Suit Samus cosplay over here? Like, you couldn't do anything else? No? Okay. Other than that, though, I think it's fine. So getting to the actual game, 5 is a lot of fun. Like, I don't really have much more to add beyond its differences with 4. Visually, the game is stellar, and still is, to be honest, and the sound design is excellent. Gameplay is very similar to 4's. I think the major difference here is that it's a co-op game. You will always have your teammate right beside you. Whether you're playing as Chris or Sheva, it doesn't matter, you're always gonna have a secondary character to help you against the hordes. The hordes are much larger in this game, so it kind of needs to be in that way, because one person going through this without any help would be a tall order. And you don't have to play it co-op, you can still play it alone and the AI will take up the reins of whoever you're not playing as. And while the AI isn't perfect, it's still pretty good and does everything right for the most part, so no real complaints there. Another key issue is that, much like 4, you have to be scrounging out ammo for your various weapons that you get throughout the game. The issue here, and this is a big one, is that you have to share the ammunition with your partner at all times. The only thing that's cross-compatible is money. Doesn't matter who picked up the money, both players get the money. But when it comes to ammo, ammo goes to whoever picks it up. So you have to keep in mind, does your partner need that ammunition more than you? It's something to think about. So you have to split your resources between each other to make sure each one is taken care of. Usually what this comes down to is one player will be specializing in one type of ammo while the other will focus on another. For example, for my playthrough of this footage, I chose shotgun, my partner chose a machine gun. So he took all the machine gun ammo and I took the shotgun ammo. This helps balance things out a bit better, but we were still sharing handgun ammo as well as healing items, so it's still something to keep in mind as you play throughout the game. Is this anyone's idea of a survival horror game? Like, is your most terrifying thing having to share with somebody else? If so, RE5 will freak you out. I mentioned the plot already, but it's great. Like, honestly, it puts a cap on the story started out so long ago. And frankly, I think they did a tremendous job with it. Is it perfect? No, of course it was never gonna be. But I think for what they did with it, it's pretty good. Definitely worth a play if you want to see the finale to the original story of Umbrella. And Wesker, one of the most memorable villains in the entire series. Working with him are a few new villains, like Memories Ahoy over here, who just really wants Wesker to love her, and this dude, who's the one currently exploiting the Africans, and probably just purchased some HIV medication just to increase the price off of it by 1,000% or something. The inventory system is also completely different. For one thing, the shop isn't just on the map. Like, you don't go up to the guy and shop with a guy. So no more, what are you buying? Which is disappointing. That was one of the best things about 4. Instead, the shop is always there in between levels, or when you die and restart. which is convenient, I suppose, but it's kind of weird, like all of a sudden I can just buy stuff just in between levels. Like, is there a shop invisible there between where the characters are going? Like, I don't get it. But I think a bigger issue with the inventory system is it is not like 4's at all. You get 9 slots to work with. That's it. Any other extra inventory has to be kept in a separate box that you can only access when you're buying stuff. So ultimately, you're gonna have to pick and choose what you're bringing in. And mind you, ammo, like always, takes up its own slot. So you have to keep that in mind whenever you're putting things in. You can't just throw in a bunch of guns and be fine, because then you won't have any room for any ammunition for those guns. And remember, you can't stash things when you're in the game. So if you take more than what you can carry and have to get rid of something, well, that item is gone, unless you give it to your partner. You can trade items with your partner at any time. And in fact, you'll probably be doing that quite often. Some people really don't like RE5's inventory system. I kind of get what they were doing, because this 9 grid also introduces the notion of being able to quick swap using a D-pad. And frankly, I think 4 desperately needed that function. Having to go into your inventory every single time to swap your weapon was a complete nightmare sometimes. It was just tedious. Being able to switch on the fly is a lot better, but you're still only limited to 9 slots, where in 4 you had this great kit that, while it could be a little tedious to sort through, still sized items in a more realistic way. Rocket launchers don't take up as much space as herbs, but here everything takes up the same amount of space like in classic Resident Evil. Whether or not you prefer that is a matter of opinion, but honestly I think if they were going to introduce a quick swap feature, why not, follow me on this, why not have it so that quick swap is a separate thing from the attaché case, and you can pick and choose what goes into the quick slots from the attaché case if you have to, and then you have the case there that you can sort and have more items. Maybe they wanted to limit you some more, making it scarier somehow, like old school RE, I don't know. I don't get it. Some people like it, some people don't. It's different. That's what I'm gonna tell you. So if it sounds better or worse to you, that's you, man. That's you. Also, playing this, I cannot believe how much of this game I completely forgot about. Like, I remember bits and pieces, but honestly, I played a lot of RE5 back then. But I haven't played it in like 10 years. But even with that, I usually have a pretty good memory, and I can remember most of the games that I've played and enjoyed, and I remember liking 5 a lot. But there were parts of the game that I played through for this review where I was like, what is this? When did this happen? I have no memory of this. Basically, the entire temple section, I completely blanked on. I have no recollection of this part, which is weird because it's actually one of the better parts because they do have puzzles in the game too. It's not just a run and gun experience. While it is more actiony than 4 was, it still gives you puzzles to solve. Some of the time, in fact, most of the time, you need your partner in order to solve them. RE5 is one of the best co-op experiences I've ever played in my life. And to be honest, if you're looking for a game to play with a friend, to work together towards a common goal, I think RE5 should be one of the top choices because it's handled in such a great way in that regard. I just don't get why I don't remember it. Like, I completely forgot about the giant spider boss. And you'd think that I, of all people, would remember there's a giant freaking edgy spider boss, but I don't. How did I do that? It's like someone's messing with my mind or something. Oh! That was weird. That happens a lot. I should go to the doctor. Nah, probably fine. Anyway, I think ultimately the biggest downfall of 5 as a Resident Evil game, though, is the fear factor, or rather the lack thereof. It just isn't a scary game. It's disturbing. It still has the body horror, it has some really, really gross elements, but in terms of the dread, isolating fear factor, it doesn't exist here. And I don't want to say that you can't make a scary co-op game, because the more recent Phasmophobia proves that this is very, very easy to do, actually. It's just that 5 didn't have a focus on scares, pretty much at all. It had a focus on fun mechanics and co-op, which is an odd choice for a main series Resident Evil game. In that regard, I think it falls a little short, and even 4, for all its actiony goodness, still had more dreading fear than 5 does. But at the same time, 5 is still a great game and does cap off the series really well in terms of the initial story. So I can't hate it. In fact, I quite enjoy Resident Evil 5. If you haven't played it, I would recommend it. It's a lot of fun. I would definitely encourage you to play with a friend though, because most of the fun of the game is gonna be working together with someone else, or watching that person get mauled by infected. You know, whatever you're into, no judgment, man. Moving forward into RE6, well, okay. So RE6 shares a bunch of other controversy, having nothing to do with racial prejudice or anything of the like. It has to do with the fact that this game sucks. Okay, I need to back up. I need to chill out. I need to calm down. Is it that bad? Yeah, a little bit. Okay, it has its good points. I forgot about a lot of RE6 too when I was playing it for the review, but I think that had less to do with time and more to do with the fact that the game is so just forgettable on its own. For a game that features multiple stories with multiple recognizable characters, the return of Leon Kennedy, Chris Redfield, Sherry Birkin, and Ada Wong, you'd think you'd have more to remember. Like, this is an all-star cast in terms of Resident Evil. These are very popular characters, and they're all there and all playable in the main story. So from that point, it comes across as very strong, and I'm gonna lead here by talking about the good points of the game because it does have some good elements. For one thing, the gameplay itself actually is the ultimate best version of the over-the-shoulder Resident Evil mechanics ever, period. That is what I'm saying. What I mean by that is, first of all, unlike 5 and 4, you can move while you shoot. In addition, the melee attack is not restricted to a 2-button command. It is 1 button, right trigger, in case you're wondering, and you can press it multiple times to do combo attacks that change based off of whatever weapon you're using. It feels so much better from an action standpoint. You actually feel like you're really in control of the game and can deal with the threats before you. The game sets the mood very well. Since the original plot was capped off with 5, naturally they have to do something new. And why not go back to your roots and do a zombie outbreak? And it handles it in a really good way from the start, at least, because Leon in particular is a lot more down to earth in this game. He's much more like he was in RE2, where he seems more real. Instead of coming up with one-liners and just acting like an inhuman James Bond caricature, he acts more like a guy who's been through this multiple times and is sick of watching people suffering. He's a hero and goes out of his way to help as many people as he can, but he often fails. And you can tell it troubles him. He's more real as a person in RE6, and it handles him in such a better way. And in fact, most of the characters are handled like this. Chris is greatly bothered by how many people he's lost over the course of his experiences. And Sherry has had to suffer isolation most of her life because of her unique nature as someone who survived the G virus and been administered the vaccine. She has a weird healing factor, and she's often used in approved experiments because there's a lot to learn from her. And while she has been protected for most of her life, she's still sometimes seen as a subject, not a person. There's also new characters such as Helena here, who gets involved through trying to save her sister. Chris's partner, who nobody cares about, I completely forget his name. I do. I don't. He's such a nothing character, I'm sorry. And Jake. Who's Jake? He's Wesker's kid. I'll just tell you that right now. This is mission critical, because the notion of Wesker having a kid at any point was something that nobody even considered. Wesker was not really the type to just mess around and have an illegitimate kid, okay? He was way too absorbed in himself. But apparently at some point, he did have Jake. Jake never knew his dad, and because Wesker was part of a eugenics project and had superior genes, literally, he did, Jake inherits a lot of his superior traits. Not by choice, naturally, he's not his dad, but that's how he winds up involved, because he has the antibodies to the current viral outbreak, which is being caused by a new virus called the C virus. Visually, the game is stunning, and the sound design is excellent. So what's wrong with it? I've talked about how great the characters are, how great the environments are, how great it is dealing with the crisis going on. So what's wrong with it? Everything else! It is such a hollow experience, and it's the weirdest thing. Because playing it, you can tell the mechanics are done really well and are handled in a much better way compared to the previous games. And yet somehow, they wound up with an inferior product. The narrative, which is of course new, dealing with a new villain because it has to, does not come across nearly as strongly as any of the previous games did. It's a tall order to come up with a villainous organization as good and legendary as Umbrella was in the original narrative. But the new villains don't come anywhere near. And honestly, I think despite the fact that it handles the people in a much more realistic way, it handles everything else in a much more unrealistic way. The environments you're in often make zero frickin' sense. Like, there's no way this is happening. Somehow there's like mile-deep catacombs down here. I don't know when these were built. I don't know how these were built. Also, there's a shark down here, an infected shark. How'd the virus get all the way down here? No idea. Why are we going down this tube at 70 miles an hour while being chased by an infected shark? You might think I'm nitpicking a really specific thing that happens in the game, but no. Let's talk about Leon and Helena. All right. These guys get into multiple accidents. Vehicular accidents. They get in a car accident, in a bus accident. They get in a plane crash and are thrown around like ragdolls, and they always seem to walk away. Now, it's normal in action games and movies, for that matter, for the hero to have main character powers and somehow avoid serious injury. But RE6 takes it to a whole new level. At least with Sherry, she has a healing factor, so when she gets impaled, it at least makes sense where she survived that, because that's her whole thing. But Leon and Helena aren't mutants. They aren't infected with anything. They aren't super beings. They're just regular people, and somehow they can shrug off what should, at the bare minimum, break some ribs, cause a concussion, something. Just anything. It never happens. Never. Ever happens in the game. They shoehorn in a bunch of puzzles, but ultimately they feel mostly flat and have you wandering around just wondering what to do. It feels like the game is constantly spinning its wheels with the story, wasting your time more than anything. And the game isn't very long, so everything feels more padded out. With 5's puzzles, they were not only concise and clear, but they were still tied to what was happening. But 6's just feel like big time wasters. Like, okay, we're in a bazaar in China, and I need 3 keys to get in the storage room? Why? Why would anybody lock up the storage room in a Chinese bazaar with 3 keys? Naturally, I have to run around and find these keys in the most asinine way possible while getting pursued by a new type of infected that can't actually be killed, so that's fun. Great, thank you for that. Oh yeah, there's also special infected in this game. Now, having weird enemy types is normal for Resident Evil, but it's pretty clear that Capcom took one look at Left 4 Dead and said, we gotta do that. There's the big fat zombie, the hunter-like zombie, the screaming zombie that didn't get into Left 4 Dead, but still, like, it comes across as more of taking from what other people are doing more than any original thinking. And there's no explanation for these mutated forms, they just happen spontaneously. And you might say the same thing happened in the Left 4 Dead universe, but Left 4 Dead is an action co-op game. This is supposed to be a survival horror game. It's supposed to be explanation and lore and things to learn and stuff like that. And it just never seems to happen here. Chris's story is outrageously dull. Leon and Helena's just comes across as ridiculous. Like, okay, how about this? Before the plane crash, okay, somehow the pilot of the plane gets infected. Okay, fine. So we gotta go stop the zombie that's destroying the plane. Okay, great, but there's nobody flying the plane. Both you and your partner have to run across the entire plane, stop the zombie, and then all of a sudden Huntington's on the phone like, hey, you should probably go fly at the plane. Yeah, I feel like that was a pretty critical part of the situation. Are you kidding me? This makes no sense. But don't worry, you crash the plane, probably kill a couple hundred people, no big deal, and they just walk out. They just walk out of the plane like it ain't no thing. Like this was no big deal. You just survived a plane crash. I'm not saying that people don't survive car and plane crashes all the time, because that happens. But for them to walk away uninjured from this many accidents in the span of 24 hours, I attempted to calculate the odds of this. However, my calculator literally imploded into a black hole out of rebellion for having to calculate this nonsense. Games ask you to suspend your disbelief all the time, but RE6 takes it to a whole new level, and I would be okay with that if I was having fun. But like I said, everything that's going on feels like it's so overdone and has zero point in context. The villains get taken care of by the end of the game, so there's no sequel situation here. It's just an isolated story like RE4 was, except RE4 was good, and RE6 friggin' isn't. If you're playing it with a friend, it can be stupid fun, yeah, but ultimately, the only story I really cared that much about was Sherry's, because at least with her, like, she's interesting. We haven't really gotten any information about her since RE2, so it's nice to see a narrative that's actually explaining what's been going on with her over the years and what her situation is now. Although, if there's any other issue that RE6 has, Sherry, I gotta bring this up. It's the level of tone deafness we have in this narrative. Because for whatever reason, and I don't know why, RE6 decided that they were going to put a bunch of fan service in the game. And, you know, Resident Evil, generally speaking, hasn't really been about that, like, ever. There's been times where stuff happens where it's a little fan servicey, and like I said, RE5 had the, you know, extra costumes, and again, Memories Ahoy over here, you know. So it's not like it doesn't exist, but in terms of the core narrative, it seemed like it at least fit. It didn't really intervene with anything. It didn't interrupt the situation. It didn't feel distracting. But RE6 is like, we gotta put fan service in. Oh, I know, how about having this heartbreaking scene involving Helena's sister getting infected and being forced to murder her family, by making it so that Helena's sister is the most unspeakably sexy zombie in existence. Like, all she does is crawl around, straddle on top of you, and moan. Oh, and touch herself too, because why not? What is going on? I have the most confusing erection right now. It doesn't make any sense. It's, like I said, tone deaf. This is supposed to be a heartbreaking, emotional scene. You're supposed to feel badly for this character, and yet the whole time you're distracted by the fact that she turned into a walking zombie sex bomb. What is happening? And naturally, of course, they couldn't frickin' resist, and I can't believe this. They sexualized Sherry Birkin, and that troubles me. See, there's a part in the game where both Sherry and Jake get captured and are experimented on by 6 months. To begin with, this was completely glossed over, and I think this should be much more horrific than it's made out to be. Like, they're just fine after 6 months, and Jake just casually escapes. Like, aren't you gonna mention the horrific experiments you were likely subjected to? No, you're fine? Oh, okay. But Sherry's put in like a hospital gown, but an ill-fitting one, and even though Sherry has proportions that are fairly realistic for a girl her age and fitness level, they still decided to give her boobs the most outrageous jiggle physics possible and include gratuitous panty shots. And you know, this weirds me out. Most of us got introduced to Sherry in RE2, and she was a kid. She wasn't even 10 years old. Like, watching this happen now, it's like watching someone sexualize their daughter. It's the most off-putting thing imaginable. Like, I couldn't deal. Like, I get that she's in a hospital outfit, but couldn't they give her pants like Jake has? Like, I know why they did this. I know exactly why they did it, and they didn't do it for the right reason. It doesn't fit the narrative. It's just there because, oh, look at the jiggles. Boobies! Yay! No, damn it, that's not what the series is supposed to be focused on. You're supposed to be focused on these characters, you're supposed to be focused on the story, you're supposed to be focused on the horror aspect, and RE6 drops the freaking ball in almost every regard in this aspect. Oh, the inventory system? Yeah, by the way, it eats. Yeah, I've said it, it's terrible. I hate it. I hate the way you heal, I hate the way you select weapons, it's all awful. So yeah, that's a thing. RE6 has a place in history as the worst main series Resident Evil game. Some people do enjoy it, and like I said, if you're playing with a friend, it can be good for some stupid fun and some laughs, but as a serious take on the lore and the story and the characters, it fails miserably in that regard. And if you're someone like me who cares about all that, then you're probably gonna hate it. If you want some stupid co-op fun, yeah, I guess you could play it for that reason, but otherwise, I would skip it entirely. Because that's the other thing about this narrative. There was no sequel hook or anything like that. Nothing about 6 affects 7, and presumably 8. It has nothing to do with anything else. So ultimately, it can be overlooked and ignored, which I guess is the nicest blessing here because at least it doesn't have any critical elements that affect the overall story. And the stuff that does, like involving Sherry and her lore, at least were some of the decent aspects, so they can pick and choose those parts to bring up and ignore everything else because no one wants to talk about that. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.